بخير وصحة فطوركم. مرحبا بكم في برنامجكم الرمضاني SahraTech. En fait, je voudrais, avant de commencer ma présentation, je voudrais remercier les spectateurs بفضل مشاهداتكم بفضل متابعتكم. برنامج SahraTech استمر في شهر رمضان ونجح واليوم نجاحه يعني est partagé un peu partout. Donc avant de commencer, je vous demande de partager ce live parce qu'il est très important et très intéressant. Encore une fois, مرحبا بكم au 15e webinaire de SahraTech, votre programme ramadanesque qui a pour objectif d'offrir un canal de communication aux experts nationaux et internationaux et de vulgariser les concepts essentiels qui tournent autour des processus de transformation multidimensionnelle et des sujets d'actualité qui traitent de l'écosystème de l'innovation. Je profite de cette occasion, comme d'habitude, pour remercier l'équipe brillante de Algeria Startup Challenge pour le travail pertinent et continu durant ce mois de Ramadan. Aujourd'hui, nous avons choisi, en collaboration avec le Programme des Nations Unies pour le développement en Algérie, le sujet des objectifs de développement durable ou ODD et l'impact du Covid-19. Le Programme des Nations Unies pour le développement, PNUD, est l'une des agences de l'ONU et élabore des programmes dans le but de venir en soutien aux pays en développement en leur fournissant non seulement de l'expertise et des conseils, mais également en plaidant leur cause pour l'octroi de contributions financières destinées à la mise en œuvre de ces actions. Le PNUD travaille en collaboration avec d'autres organisations internationales telles que IPU et OMS notamment. Son siège est situé à New York, aux États-Unis. Présent en Algérie depuis 1977, le PNUD est l'agence principale de l'ONU en charge de la lutte contre la pauvreté et les inégalités à travers le monde. Étant donné son mandat et son large réseau mondial, il prend des approches multisectorielles et mobilise l'expertise spécialisée des agences onusiennes et des centres d'excellence pour accompagner le gouvernement dans sa réponse aux défis d'un véritable développement durable qui est juste, équitable et inclusif. Les différents plans de développement conduits par l'Algérie depuis une décennie ont entraîné une amélioration significative du niveau général de bien-être et de la qualité de vie des Algériens. Des facteurs importants pour l'atteinte d'ici 2030 des objectifs de développement durable, ODD, des investissements publics importants ont concerné l'ensemble des secteurs et particulièrement ceux en charge directe du développement durable dans ses composantes développement économique, développement humain et environnemental. L'équipe du PNUD n'est pas restée indifférente face à la pandémie Covid-19. Le programme a lancé un appel à l'action à la communauté internationale pour qu'elle puisse organiser des actions ciblées pouvant contribuer à atténuer l'impact immédiat de Covid-19. L'organisation a souligné la nécessité de 3 actions prioritaires: des ressources pour aider à stopper la propagation du virus, un soutien pour répondre pendant l'épidémie elle-même et des ressources pour empêcher l'effondrement économique des pays en développement. Pour nous parler des ODD du PNUD et de l'impact du Covid-19 sur la vie socio-économique, nous avons l'immense privilège de vous présenter Madame Blerta Aliko, représentante résidente du PNUD à Alger. Madame Blerta, bonsoir.
Bonsoir.
Comment allez-vous?
Très bien, merci. Merci beaucoup pour cette invitation.
Merci à vous d'avoir répondu à notre invitation. Ça nous fait vraiment plaisir de partager ce moment de valeur avec vous. Et donc, je vais vous présenter rapidement et je reviens vers vous.
Merci.
Madame Blerta Aliko a rejoint le PNUD d'Algérie en qualité de représentante résidente le 14 octobre 2019. Elle a une formation professionnelle en matière de développement et de questions humanitaires, notamment en matière d'égalité des sexes et d'autonomisation des femmes. Elle a commencé sa carrière à l'ONU en 1980. De l'enfant, la protection et la cohésion et en Asie. pour les Arabes et représente Blerta, apparemment, j'ai eu une petite coupure, hein, donc je pense que je vous ai présenté. Je ne sais pas si la coupure était longue ou pas. Donc, je reviens vers vous. It's really a pleasure to have you with us, Blerta, today. And before we start the presentation, I'd like to ask you, how is your journey going so far in Algeria?
Well, thank you very much, and really very honored to be with you all. Before I start, I really would like to thank very much the Algeria Startup Challenge for initiating this series of webinars that have been extremely useful and informative, have made our Ramadan nights very exciting and very engaging. So I have had the privilege to attend a few of those. Secondly, we are very honored to partner with you through our initiative, which is the Acceleration Lab, which is really an innovation in UNDP and in development programs for accelerating the achievement of sustainable development goals through innovative solutions, and basically reflecting a new generation of UNDP that gets closer to what's happening in 21st century, and then basically breaking a bit the barriers of the bureaucracy of the heavy machinery of a UN organization with what's happening in the outside world, with in touch with the youth, with innovation, with solutions, to be able to enter into synergies with the private sector, with the civil society, with all the actors that contribute to the development of an inclusive society in general. So very proud to be part of this. The journey so far has been great. It's a beautiful country, so I can't complain. And I love work and I love the climate, so I cannot complain. Before I start, I wanted to say a couple of words in Arabic,
Yes,
although it's not that perfect, but I think it's the minimum I can do to start the evening in the right way. So مساء الخير، أنا سعيدة جدا لوجودي معكم هذه الليلة من شهر رمضان في حلقة SahraTech. أغتنم هذه الفرصة كي أتمنى لكم عيد سعيد وكلهم وأنتم بخير. أنا بودي أتابعها بلغتي العربية، لكن معلش سوف بالفرنسية والإنجليزية. شكرا.
Thank you very much, Blerta. I think today we're going to talk about the Sustainable Development Goals of PNUD and the impact of COVID-19 for the first part of this evening. Concerning the second part, it's gonna be a Q&A part. So we ask all the viewers to send their questions on the Facebook Live so we can answer them. And I think we are ready to go. So you can
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Well, my presentation, as you rightly said, is going to be the part of it to explain a bit the global agenda of 2030 and how UNDP situates itself and its program and its mandate in it, and what has been the impact of COVID. And I'll take also an opportunity to describe a bit our program and our role here in the country since 1977, as you rightly said. The Sustainable Development Goals are a first in human history, a global compact to create a future where nobody is left behind. The 17 goals are adopted by all member states, including Algeria, in September 2015 meeting in the United Nations, where I actually had the privilege to work in New York at that time. They encompass every aspect of human and planetary well-being, a universal call to action to end poverty, to protect Earth, and to ensure all people enjoy peace and prosperity. Immediately after, as we know, after 2030 agenda, we had the privilege really to all member states, a lot of member states, 196 countries, to sign the Paris Climate Agreement, which 196 countries plus the European Union pledged to keep the planet's temperature at well below 2°C, higher than ever it was before the Industrial Revolution began. So this is a very ambitious goal that those two platforms and SDGs plus the Paris Climate Agreement make the foundations of the work of development that we work today. Fundamentally, what those call for is mobilizing financing, enhancing national implementation and strengthening national institutions to achieve this development goals, 2030 agenda, and leave no one behind. I think it's fundamental to understand the principle of leave no one behind, and this is why this is a unique agenda and we are in the last decade of action, because this is about equality, is about equality, is about the most vulnerable and most excluded to have equal opportunities in the development of society and their country. So while the Secretary General António Guterres, he really pushed very hard to make a pledge and a call to all the countries, basically to end the deadly conflicts, to manage the climate crisis, to work towards eliminating gender-based violence, and also to fight the persistent and rising inequalities in the world. These are the four key, if I may put, principles that underpin the Leave No One Behind agenda, or let's say personne pour compte, and really pushing this 2030 like a global development for everyone, everywhere in the planet. For the reminder, because we are discussing in this webinar, the 17 SDGs are the no poverty, the zero hunger, the good health and well-being, the quality education, gender equality, which I know I'm very well aware that in the Arab world has a different translation, so they are unfortunately not well all translated in Arabic. The number 6, which is the water, the number 7, which is affordable and clean energy, the number 8, which is about the decent work, number 9 on industry, innovation, infrastructure, number 10 on reducing inequalities, 11 on sustainable cities and communities, 12 responsible consumption and production, 13 climate action, 14 life below the water, 15 life on land, 16 peace, justice, and strong institutions, and 17 partnerships for global goals. The development must balance the social, economic, and environmental sustainability. If someone would dig further to those SDGs, you will see that there are more than 200 or close to 300 targets and indicators, which bring accountability to this agenda based on every national development platform. And Algeria has signed to the Global Development Goals in 2015 and has a very strong action plan towards mobilizing country resources for achieving those goals. Let's not forget, and I will mention it later, that Algeria has already done very well in the prior platform, which is the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals, with achieving almost all the targets by being the second country in Africa after the Seychelles and the number 1 in Maghreb for achieving that agenda. So when the country signs up to normatives, this is a very serious commitment on behalf of everyone to make it a reality. Now, what's UNDP role in this agenda, in this global agenda? Because UNDP is one of the UN organizations. As you rightly said at the beginning, there are other UN organizations. And in UNDP, we work in about 170 countries, and we look towards integrated solutions by focusing on systems, root causes, and connections between those solutions, and also building solutions that respond to people's reality. So I think it's very important to look at both sides, strong institutions, but grounded on people's realities, needs, and impact. And the reason why I'm bringing it together, because it's underpinned by a very strong human rights-based agenda, which is basically the right holders and duty bearers. So the responsibilities, obligations versus rights, and also between those who held the power versus those who give the power through the voting and through the democratic process. So that human rights-based agenda underpins those principles of the integrated solutions of what UNDP works on. And how does UNDP deliver? We discussed earlier when we were discussing together, and we talked about partnerships, and partnerships at all levels. Partnerships at government level, of course, because we are here as at the call and at the request of the member state, private partnership with the private sector. And there has been a huge realization from the MDG agenda that there is no development without integrating and without working together with the private sector. All our solutions of sustainable development are very much intertwined with the solutions for responsible private sector development, civil society and roles of the citizens to make sure that we live in a better place and on a planet for future generations. And indeed, the civil society is basically the role of holding to account, but at the same time ensuring that the obligations of citizens towards their rights are also met. On UNDP, we have 6 programmatic solutions for which we call them signature solutions, which define UNDP's mandate and role in every single country. They are not applied the same way in every country because, as you can imagine, when you work in 170 countries, some are countries of low income, some are middle income, some are high income, some are in conflicts, some are impacted by disasters. Recently, we had the corona, which impacted us globally everywhere. And those, very briefly, those signature solutions are aiming at keeping people out of poverty and eradicate all forms of poverty. And this is very much related to SDG 1, which is no poverty, but across, like decent work, number 8, 16 on strong institutions, 17 on partnerships, etc. Governance for peaceful, just, and inclusive society, which basically talks about, and the work aims at including an inclusion of on decision making, fair institutions, and just institutions. The third is about crisis prevention and increased resilience, and this we have it more prominently in countries impacted by conflict or by heavy natural disasters. Forget that about 1.6 billion people live in fragile or in conflict affected settings, out of which 600 million are young people. And also the same under the crisis prevention, we include all the work around reducing risk and preventing and recovering from the disasters and natural risks. The fourth is environment, nature-based solutions for development. And our purpose is to support the healthy ecosystems for social well-being and economic growth. Of course, we are partners of Global Environment Facility, and this is also a facility that is very much active here in Algeria, where we have, I will talk a bit about later, some big achievements to announce tonight, which we are very proud. And indeed, the partnership has been between Government of Algeria, UNDP, and the Global Environment Facility. We help build definitely capacities to support countries to achieve the commitment they do to the Paris Agreement and to other environmental agreements and also conventions that the countries sign up to. The fifth is clean and affordable energy, which is reliable, safe, and affordable energy. 840 million people globally have no access to electricity, and it's our work and mandate to support transition away from the use of finite fossil fuels and towards clean, renewable, and affordable sources of energy. So we bring all global expertise, tools, and of course, leverage financing to achieve in partnerships with the governments. The sixth one is the women's empowerment and gender equality, with a particular focus on participation of women in decision-making, but also mainstreaming women's rights and gender equality across all our results area. And this is fundamental for me, who is a passionate and has worked on women's rights for a good number of years. There is no achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals without women's rights, and there is no achievement of women's rights without the achievement of the development. So those two agendas are very much dependable on each other. So to conclude on the global part and on this first part of my introduction is that UNDP has a critical advisory role in driving the Sustainable Development Agenda based on member states' priorities and countries' context, of course, by providing key systems-wide services and country support platforms to support the implementation of Sustainable Development Goals. This is the first part, which I really wanted to situate the Sustainable Development Goals and the role of UNDP in a global sense. Let me go a bit into the details of what has been the impact of the COVID, globally speaking, and allow me to provide only a few statistics that I was able to collect from sources across the organization. So far, over 4.6 million cases worldwide, with more than 350,000 deaths. This is a report from WHO as of 19 May, as of yesterday. The foothold is in 216 countries, areas, or territories, some already with pre-existing conditions like extreme poverty, ongoing conflict, natural disasters, and climate change. 500 million people, so 500 million people, could be pushed into poverty by coronavirus unless urgent action is taken to bail out developing countries. And this is from Oxfam. The economic crisis that is rapidly unfolding is deeper than the 2008 global financial crisis. So you remember we were talking earlier about the 2008 crisis, as some of the thinkers and think tanks that are already associated also with your work, that how drastic and dramatic that crisis was globally. And we are at the moment living a historical moment where we are even in a worse situation than in 2008, globally speaking. Estimates show that regardless of the scenario, global poverty could increase for the first time since 1990. And what does this sentence mean? It means that already a reflection on the first SDG, which is no poverty, on the second, on the hunger, on the fifth, on the gender equality, on the whole, on the 16th, on the 8th, on the decent employment, these are all heavily impacted, which means that that decennium of action that we had a plan in January has completely to be revised and to be looked at, and how to accelerate to keep on the same target, or what would be the mitigating measures for us to not regress the achievements we have made today. So the dilemma, globally speaking, is that what would be the accelerators that we still can meet the 2030 agenda in 10 years, and what would be the strategies to stop this crisis from impacting the global agenda, which means of development, human development, and global development further. So these are very fundamental issues. I leave the data here, but according to ILO, the most hit sectors are accommodation and food services, manufacturing, retail and business services, administrative activities. However, I would also say that we have had very startling data and very catastrophic numbers when it comes to increased rates of violence against women. And at the moment, I'm talking only about physical violence, which has been the most evident and most registered. I'm not talking about the other forms of violence like psychological, economic violence, etc. So enough with the dark numbers, but it was just to put into perspective the global challenge we are in, where Algeria is part of the global context, is not spared. It has its own dynamics, but and which I will go into it also a bit later. Then I would like to also present a bit the work here in Algeria, what UNDP is doing, and also what is our role in the COVID response, and what we call it in UNDP jargon, our offer towards the COVID response and national efforts to respond and to mitigate the COVID impact. Allow me that to explain that the way UN works, that UNDP's program is anchored under what we call it strategic development framework of the whole country team, meaning the whole UN agencies. There is a framework of cooperation between the government at the UN, and the UNDP's cooperation and country programs fall under this platform. And allow me to switch in French for describing a bit the cooperation in the country for Algeria, between the UN and the government of Algeria. Algérie est un pays à revenu intermédiaire, a accompli des remarquables progrès économiques et sociaux au cours des dernières années, comme en témoigne le rapport sur le OMD. En fait, le OMD, c'est le rapport de Millennium Development Goals, publié en octobre 2016. Où vraiment on a les chiffres que j'ai parlé tout à l'heure par rapport à l'amélioration constante de son indice de développement humain. En Afrique, l'Algérie était classée deuxième après les Seychelles, première au niveau des pays du Maghreb, passée de 0,5 en 90 à 0,7 à peu près en 2017, soit une augmentation de 30% qui s'explique par des avancées sur l'espérance de vie et la naissance, des durées moyennes de scolarité et de revenus par habitat. Ça, c'est vraiment une réussite énorme et c'est pour ça que je disais avec beaucoup de confiance et beaucoup d'admiration pour l'Algérie et le gouvernement algérien pour les efforts qu'ils ont faits par rapport à l'agenda de MDGs. C'est aussi dans cette optique-là qu'on a vraiment développé le plan de 2016. Moi, j'étais pas là, mais vraiment l'équipe de pays en Algérie. Et en fait, avec l'équipe interministérielle du gouvernement algérien, ils font un suivi de mise en œuvre des ODD. Parce que tout à fait, le cadre stratégique, ça a commencé en 2016, tout de suite après la signature de l'agenda de 2030. Et ça, c'est vraiment, c'est très, très, très important parce que ça aligne le travail qu'on fait, le financement, les programmes, les visions stratégiques avec la vision 2030 du gouvernement algérien. Ce cadre reflète l'identité collective des agences des Nations Unies en Algérie pour le développement durable et son désir d'offrir des solutions intégrées selon une approche programme au lieu d'une approche agence qui soit à la hauteur de l'ambition de l'agenda 2030. Et pourquoi une approche programme et pas une approche agence? Et c'est très important de comprendre parce que, en fait, l'agenda 2030, c'est pas que chaque agence a une responsabilité vers un ODD. Chaque agence a la responsabilité entière sur tous les ODD parce que, en fait, c'est un agenda très intégré et c'est ça qui fait, en fait, que cet agenda, c'est pas par mandat, c'est pas par un secteur, mais c'est intégré. Ça veut dire que le PNUD peut se trouver, travailler dans le ODD 1, dans l'ODD 5, ODD 8, ODD 13, ODD 17, ODD 16 de gouvernance. Et la même chose pour des autres agences. Et comme ça, quand on fait une approche programme, ça veut dire qu'on a une théorie de changement par rapport aux indicateurs des ODD du pays, quand on travaille, on appuie les efforts institutionnels et bien sûr de développement humain. Et ça, c'était juste pour cadrer un petit peu le travail du PNUD ici en pays. Pratiquement, les listes des projets du PNUD en Algérie, on a deux piliers primaires. C'est le pilier gouvernance et le deuxième pilier, c'est environnement et développement durable. Comme je vous ai expliqué tout à l'heure dans le Signature Project, bien sûr que on est aligné avec le cadre et la vision stratégique du PNUD global et bien sûr avec les ODD et l'agenda 2030 du pays. Je suis très fière de parler de projet réinsertion des détenus parce que le projet appuie à la réinsertion sociale des détenus a comme objectif principal de renforcer la prise en charge des détenus en phase intra- et post-carcérale en matière de réinsertion sociale et de répondre davantage aux préoccupations et attentes de cette frange de la société qui, la plupart du temps, souffre de marginalisation. Le projet consacre un intérêt primordial au facteur humain pour la mise en place de mécanismes de développement durable en tenant compte du renforcement des capacités en introduction d'outils modernes de gestion en impliquant la société civile dans différentes étapes de cette réinsertion et en intégrant la dimension genre. En fait, c'est très important parce que je voulais souligner surtout en fait les objectifs d'élaboration de programmes adaptés pour la prise en charge individuelle des détenus, adaptation et extension des services d'évaluation et orientation des détenus, implication avancée de la société civile dans le processus de réinsertion intra- et post-carcérale des détenus, échange sud-sud des meilleures pratiques suivies dans le cadre de réforme nationale. La modernisation de la politique pénitentiaire constitue l'un des volets prioritaires de la réforme de la justice. Elle vise tout d'abord à humaniser les conditions de détention et de faire de la bonne application des peines au moyen de garantir la réinsertion sociale des détenus. En fait, la thématique, vraiment, on est dans le respect des droits de l'homme, l'accompagnement entre et post-carcéral, comme je viens de dire. Un deuxième programme que nous, on est très fiers, qu'on travaille beaucoup avec le gouvernement algérien, c'est l'appui à la formulation de la politique globale de prévention de la corruption. Le PNUD accompagne l'organe national de prévention de lutte contre la corruption durant tout le processus de formulation de la politique globale de prévention de la corruption selon une approche participative et inclusive, associant les divers acteurs et parties prenantes en Algérie pour l'atteinte des objectifs suivants: le renforcement des capacités des acteurs intervenant dans la formulation de la politique globale de prévention de la corruption, l'appui dans la phase préparatoire pour l'élaboration du diagnostic à travers la mise en place d'un cadre stratégique et de mécanismes de consultation efficaces, l'élaboration de la politique globale de la prévention de la corruption, le plan d'action pour la mise en œuvre des initiatives prioritaires. Le troisième projet, c'est la Constitution au service des citoyens. C'est un projet en fait qui s'est inspiré après l'adoption le 7 février 2006 de nouvelle constitution, a ouvert la voie à une transition vers un système et un mode de gouvernance participative plus ouvert vers la société civile et les citoyens. Cette ouverture transparaît notamment à travers la nouvelle compétence du Conseil constitutionnel en matière d'exception d'inconstitutionnalité. Celle-ci permet en effet aux citoyens ordinaires de s'assurer que le droit que leur est appliqué est bien conforme à la loi fondamentale du pays. C'est dans ce contexte que le PNUD a initié un projet d'appui au Conseil constitutionnel pour favoriser l'accès des citoyens à la justice constitutionnelle et promouvoir la culture constitutionnelle. À travers cette initiative, le pouvoir public affiche clairement leur volonté d'ouvrir les juridictions constitutionnelles aux citoyens et donc mettre en œuvre les garanties inscrites dans la Constitution algérienne. On a aussi on a travaillé beaucoup sur l'appui à la participation politique effective et durable des femmes dans l'Assemblée élue. En fait, l'Algérie, à travers ce programme, est connue pas seulement en Algérie et pas seulement au Moyen-Orient, mais je dirais dans toute l'Afrique et dans tous les pays arabes. Le programme de participation politique 2013-2019 a été financé par plusieurs pays membres. Je vais citer tout à l'heure en fait, tous les bailleurs de fonds qui nous ont financés. Mais vraiment, c'était développé, inspiré après le premier progrès de l'Algérie en matière de participation politique des femmes. Le programme a été initié par le PNUD avec le Parlement et le ministère des Affaires étrangères, avec l'objectif de soutenir la participation politique des femmes. Ce programme d'appui a été par suite élargi aux femmes élues au niveau local et il est en phase de clôturer un nouveau programme sera formulé, on espère, Inch'Allah, en 2021. Je voulais en fait citer un fait que l'Algérie, par constitution et par la loi, il y a un taux de participation des femmes, on est à peu près à 28%. Au niveau du Parlement aussi, au niveau local, en fait, a aspiré beaucoup de lois dans le pays arabe et en Afrique pour arriver en fait cet objectif-là en inspirant de l'expérience algérienne. Et bien sûr, j'ai parlé du volet gouvernance. On a aussi un autre programme que je suis sûre que les auditeurs et les collègues qui sont en ligne, ils sont très bien au courant parce que c'est un programme qui a fait vraiment le buzz et qui mérite tout le soutien parce qu'ils ont vraiment réussi beaucoup des objectifs. En fait, c'est le programme de renforcement des capacités des acteurs de développement local comme un modèle qu'on appelle le CAPDEL. En fait, c'est une tripartite innovante de partenariat par la démocratie participative et développement local. C'est un partenariat avec le ministère d'Intérieur, des collectivités locales et de l'aménagement du territoire. C'est vraiment basé aux communes, dans les wilayas, dans tous les coins du pays, même si on a 8 communes dans 8 wilayas. En fait, la distribution géographique, c'est assez important. Je voulais dire que les communes sont le groupe Jamila, Timimoun, Janet, Massad, Babar, Walid Ben Abdelkader et aussi Gazaouanet. Et dans cette commune-là, en fait, à travers ce projet, juste pour aller vers la réponse Covid, on a réussi avec une association de femmes de produire à peu près 20 000 bavettes après la réponse Covid. Il y a 4 volets de ce projet. C'est la démocratie participative et travail conjoint des acteurs locaux. Le deuxième composant, c'est la modernisation et simplification des services publics. Troisième composant, c'est le développement économique local et édification économique. Et quatrième, c'est la gestion multisectorielle des risques environnementaux et des risques majeurs. En fait, c'est tout le projet, c'est vraiment exécuté avec un partenariat très étroit au niveau local avec le Wali, avec les communes locales et avec une approche multisecteur. Par rapport au Covid et la réponse du PNUD ici en Algérie, en fait, pour nous, bien sûr on doit commencer par dire que dans les pays arabes, je pense, et même dans l'Afrique, on a une situation que vraiment l'Algérie est impactée par le virus. Mais moi, je pense qu'on a aussi une chance parce qu'on a une population assez jeune. Et en fait, on a tout le temps dit que les jeunes, voilà, le taux d'emploi, le taux de population. Moi, je viens d'un contexte où j'ai travaillé presque 4 ans en Égypte, où vraiment le population boom, on regardait ça comme un development dividend au lieu de le regarder comme une charge de la société. C'était vraiment l'esprit, c'était l'espoir du pays. Et en fait, je pense que maintenant aussi, avec cette coronavirus, cette population jeune, je pense que c'est vraiment un atout. Et heureusement aussi, on est des pays riches, pas seulement, on est vraiment pays que, je pense que l'exemple d'Algérie, qu'ils ont vraiment affronté cette crise avec beaucoup de sûreté, beaucoup de capacité et on était rassurés à chaque fois qu'on regardait les mesures qui étaient prises. Bien sûr, c'est une crise globale car l'impact c'est partout. Je parlais tout à l'heure des chiffres globaux que les agences des Nations Unies ils ont partagé. Mais ici, je pense que j'étais en train de lire les chiffres de l'OMS. Je pense que la situation vraiment maintenant, on est avec les chiffres de gens guéris, avec les institutions, avec la réponse, avec le dépistage. Je pense que on est dans la bonne voie. Alors, le UNDP's approach, en fait, to respond and to switch into English with regards to what is our added value in such context and what we can offer, given that UNDP globally has looked into 3 tiers, which is the response, which has been the prevention, but also the recovery part. In Algeria, we have been really proposing our support through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, with which we work very closely on two major areas. The first one has been putting at the disposal of the government, as we have done for every other country globally, what we call it Central d'achat, or Central Purchasing Center in Copenhagen, where UNDP has been able to support a lot of countries in purchasing emergency equipment and items that were needed for the populations, being it personal kits or being more of equipments for the strengthening of the public health system. In case of Algeria, we did present the offer, and it's always available, and the government has fully recognized this added value of our contribution and our willingness to support through our global means. The second part has been the offering for on behalf of the United Nations, as under the leadership of the resident coordinator for technical lead on the micro level and macro level socioeconomic impact assessment. The second part has been, I don't know if I hear only me, a baby crying, but the United Nations as on the micro level socioeconomic impact assessment. What is important is that we are adopting the existing needs assessment methodologies, and we are hoping that through the support of the Office of National Statistics, of the CNES, Conseil National Économique, Social et Environnemental, we can be able to launch this multi-sectoral impact assessment to look at really at the household levels, but also into the sector of the micro and small and medium enterprises. So this is a work in progress. We still have to finalize the partnership with our national counterparts and also the methodologies, so that they are tools that are being used by the government authorities, and we put them at the disposal of the country. At the same time, we are hoping that through initiatives like this one, we would be able to support the advocacy, the awareness raising, and to have platforms to support the prevention and response to the COVID crisis. In more global terms, if I don't know how many of you have had a chance, or maybe not, because this is what we do daily, but has been the Secretary General António Guterres report, which is a UN framework for the immediate socioeconomic response to COVID. And this is for global, for all countries in the world. And in that part, basically UN's efforts to save lives, protect people, and rebuild better alongside the response led by the World Health Organization, and the humanitarian response as detailed by the UN-led COVID global humanitarian response plans. Of course, Algeria doesn't belong to the humanitarian response plan because we are a middle income country, but definitely subscribes to the UN framework under different areas. The socioeconomic response framework consists of 5 streams, and I think it's important, if you allow me to just cite them very, very quickly. I had them here, but it's yes, I found it's the 5 pillars, which is the health first, protecting health services and systems during the crisis, protecting people, which is social protection and basic services. The third is economic response and recovery, and fourth is macroeconomic response and multilateral collaboration. Lastly is social cohesion and community resilience. So where we are hoping to really focus our intervention in Algeria is really under the supporting the health system, protecting people, and that's why the household survey we hope to work in order to provide the tools and the data for government public policy decision making, and then of course on the economic response and recovery. The last element, we are hoping also to be able through the SDG financing to support the macroeconomic response and multilateral collaboration. And I need to highlight very something very important, that how much Algeria advocates and is a champion of the multilateralism efforts in the world. I don't know if you have followed also the recent meetings that have happened in New York around the COVID among member states, and Algeria is very much supporting the global solutions, while at the same time protecting the national development objectives, recognizing that we have had huge global efforts, especially when it comes to the research for finding treatments and the vaccine, and really responding to this pandemic globally. At the same time, it is an opportunity and wake-up call for developing local markets and local solutions, to not only be dependent on global solutions, but also to have the homegrown solutions. From the multilateralism perspective, also Algeria has been at the forefront of the United Nations reform, development system reform. And in my meeting with the foreign minister, I did give my word and my commitment as a head of UNDP to really honor the work of Algeria and to make this reform a reality in the country. At the same time, I want to take the opportunity and use this platform to thank the government who contributed to the global appeal of UNDP for a global response, showing a global solidarity to this global crisis. Despite of every country is in difficulty, there is always space, time, will to wanting to support the others, and for that UNDP is very grateful. Before I close, I also want to give 5 minutes to present a couple of other important programs under the Environmental and Sustainable Development Program, which is one is about the conservation of biodiversity, and really at the global interest of using the durable ecosystems services in the Cultural Park of Algeria. Je ne sais pas si vous avez suivi les news il y a maintenant 2 jours, 3 jours, où le guépard de Sahara est de retour. Et on est tellement fiers parce que le PNUD avec le ministère de la Culture, ils ont vraiment travaillé dans les parcs culturels algériens qui couvrent 43% de superficie algérienne, pour vraiment protéger ce patrimoine naturel, mais aussi patrimoine humain, et cette intégration entre l'humain et la nature. Et l'apparition de guépards, d'après 10 ans, si j'ai bien compris, c'est vraiment un événement énorme, et surtout que cette bonne nouvelle vient justement 2 jours ou 3 jours, 1 semaine avant la journée mondiale de biodiversité, le 22 mai, en fait, le vendredi. Et ça, c'est très important. Je pense que vous connaissez déjà les parcs culturels du pays, qui sont des parcs protégés, comme le parc culturel du Tassil Nager et de la Gare, et aussi les parcs de Atlas saharien, de Tindouf et de Touat Guara Tigidelt. J'espère que j'ai bien dit les noms, et j'ai pas vraiment... Après, je voulais parler aussi d'une 3e communication nationale sur le changement climatique et le premier rapport biennal. En fait, ici, on rentre vraiment dans l'appui très précis et très technique par rapport à l'appui technique que le PNUD donne au gouvernement et au ministère de l'Environnement. C'est l'objectif de ce projet, la préparation de 3e communication nationale. Les experts, ils vont comprendre, en fait, et du premier rapport biennal de CCNUCC. En fait, c'est une communication nationale sur le changement climatique. Et le projet vise à renforcer les capacités physiques et institutionnelles de la partie algérienne en matière de reddition des comptes vis-à-vis cette convention, et intégrer les contraintes liées au changement dans les stratégies nationales de développement et des politiques sectorielles pertinentes. Le processus de préparation se poursuivra sur la base de dialogue permanent, d'un échange d'informations et de partenariat entre les parties prenantes, comprenant le gouvernement, la société civile, les universités, le secteur privé et bien sûr les femmes. Aussi, on vient de aussi avancer avec des rythmes assez soutenus sur l'élaboration de stratégies nationales et de cadres juridiques et institutionnels sur l'accès aux ressources génétiques et le partage juste et équitable des avantages découlant et de leur utilisation et des connaissances traditionnelles en ligne avec la Convention sur la biodiversité biologique et de son protocole de Nagoya en Algérie. On l'appelle APA, en fait capitalisant sur les progrès appréciables déjà réalisés par l'Algérie en regard des deux premiers objectifs de la Convention sur la diversité biologique, qui sont la conservation de la biodiversité et l'utilisation durable des éléments des projets APA. C'est dédié au troisième objectif de cette cadre, en fait, qui est l'accès aux ressources génétiques et le partage juste et équitable des avantages découlant de leur utilisation. Cet objectif est également celui du protocole de Nagoya, signé par l'Algérie en 2011. Le projet vise justement à activer le potentiel des ressources génétiques et des connaissances traditionnelles de l'Algérie pour gérer les avantages économiques en faveur de la nation et des principaux intervenants, notamment les populations locales, en créant un cadre favorable à l'entrepreneuriat, la création d'emplois, le transfert de technologies et de développement des capacités en matière de recherche scientifique. Voilà l'objectif tout à fait, c'est renforcer la protection et l'utilisation durable des ressources génétiques et des connaissances traditionnelles associées en Algérie par le développement et la mise en œuvre d'un cadre national de l'accès de partage des avantages compatibles avec la Convention sur la diversité biologique et de son protocole de Nagoya. Dernièrement, il y a deux initiatives qu'on va commencer, c'est la gestion intégrée de déchets solides au niveau local. Le projet, ça n'a pas encore commencé, mais on espère bientôt et les objectifs seront atteints par la mise en œuvre de 3 volets qui répondent aux principaux obstacles identifiés pour une gestion intégrée des déchets solides en Algérie et plus précisément en fait à Constantine. Le premier volet, c'est réduction du volume de déchets à la source et des distances de transport vers les décharges. Le deuxième volet, c'est valoriser les fractions organiques des déchets et réduire la quantité de déchets d'envoyer au fournissement contrôlé. Et le troisième, promotion du modèle communal de gestion intégrée des déchets au niveau régional et national. L'autre projet, c'est les jeunes et emploi. C'est par rapport à une économie, on est en train de vraiment plaidoyer, appuyer l'économie sociale et solidaire. Ce projet au service de l'inclusion économique des jeunes et de l'innovation sociale représente une continuation de l'action en appui aux autorités algériennes de leur politique de promotion d'emplois durables spécialement pour les jeunes à travers le développement de l'économie sociale et solidaire au service de l'innovation sociale et d'inclusion économique des jeunes. Je terminerai en fait avec un projet que ça me tient beaucoup à cœur, que c'est la mise en œuvre partielle du plan de gestion intégré en complexe de zones humides de Gerbes, Sanhaja. Malheureusement, je suis pas encore allée parce qu'avec le Covid, tous les plans sont bloqués. Mais ce projet découle d'un projet d'élaboration d'un plan de gestion intégré du site de Ramsar du complexe de zones humides de Gerbes. De Sanhajara Skikda, qui a été initié en fait en 2007, après clôturé en 2017, à travers un partenariat entre le gouvernement algérien et le Programme des Nations Unies pour le développement, en fait, le PNUD, avec la participation du Fonds mondial pour la nature, le WWF, le WWF, et a été mise en œuvre par la Direction générale des forêts, conservation des forêts de Skikda. Pourquoi ça me tient encore? En fait, parce que c'est un programme aussi d'éducation et de sensibilisation sur la nécessité de la prévention des zones humides de Gerbes afin d'accroître la compréhension des enjeux liés à l'environnement, du développement durable et de promouvoir une utilisation durable des ressources naturelles, de mode de vie durable. Et voilà, avec ça, je pense que j'ai présenté en fait tout le travail du PNUD global et aussi ici dans le pays. Et après, les questions, ça dépend des questions, mais je serai prêt aussi à élaborer sur de certains volets que vous voulez, que vous estimez que vous avez besoin de plus d'informations. Et pour des autres questions que je ne peux pas répondre, je vais prendre note et bien sûr, je viendrai vers vous et vers l'audience très rapidement. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Ms. Blerta. A very impressive presentation and a lot of work that you are doing. If you don't mind, I'm going to present you one more time and then we start with the Q&A session. Donc, je vais vous présenter Madame Blerta Aliko une deuxième fois. J'ai été coupée tout à l'heure. Donc, Madame Blerta Aliko a rejoint le PNUD Algérie en qualité de représentante résidente le 14 octobre 2019. Elle a une formation professionnelle en matière de développement et de questions humanitaires, notamment en matière d'égalité des sexes et d'autonomisation des femmes. Elle a commencé sa carrière à l'ONU en 1996 au PNUD, en Albanie. Et plus tard, en 2009, elle a rejoint l'UNICEF puis l'ONU, Femmes travaillant sur les droits de l'enfant et le programme des droits des femmes. Au cours des années, Blerta a soutenu la programmation humanitaire et la planification et la coordination du relèvement après la crise au Libéria, au Kenya, au Tchad et en Haïti et au Yémen. En 2012, elle a été affectée en Jordanie où elle a travaillé sur les crises de réfugiés syriens. En avril 2016, elle a été affectée en Égypte en qualité de directrice régionale adjointe d'ONU Femmes pour les États arabes et représentante d'ONU Femmes pour l'Égypte. Blerta est titulaire d'un master en administration des affaires de l'Université Femmes de Genève en Suisse et diplômée de la faculté d'économie de l'Université de Tirana en Albanie. Thank you again, Mrs. Blerta. It was a pleasure listening to you. So I believe you must know that the majority of Algerian people don't know much about the PNUD and SDGs. So I think we're going to start with a couple of basic questions before we highlight many or a couple of SDGs and discuss them in details. So my first question to you is, how are the SDGs different than the MDGs, Millennium Development Goals?
Yes, this is a very good question. I joined the UN about 20-something years ago, and indeed I had the privilege to work on the MDGs, Millennium Development Goals. For the ones who remember, we had the Millennium Development Goals, and under each goal, under each number, we had a thematic area. For example, we had education, we had maternity health, we had poverty that always was there, we had hunger, but it was thematic. And under that thematic, what we had is that every agency of the United Nations almost claimed ownership around that theme. So let me take you an example. We talked about eradicate illiteracy, and that became automatically the role of UNICEF. Or it was maternal health and automatically became a responsibility between UNICEF and UNFPA. I'm just giving you two examples. The idea of that was that, taking the example of Algeria, is that we had huge achievements. So countries took it so seriously, the commitments that made on the MDGs. So you have the maternal health that increased tremendously. So therefore you can have well-being of the whole family. You have less mortality of the children. And it was actually the healthier family, healthier women, healthier family, the whole community benefited. So you have this huge achievement when it came, for example, to the health gap. So having access to universal health. Then what happened after, then we had in the education. So for example, again, take Algeria, look at the numbers, is the country the second, the best in Maghreb and the second in Africa after the Seychelles, that if you compare only from human development indicators, because it reached also the education level in terms of literacy, in terms of concrete indicators. But what happened there is that we were not talking in an integrated way. So what happened is that we had achievement of education, we had achievement of maternal health, but that didn't translate in a global integrated human development by country. So you had certain sectors that were going forward and you have some other sectors that were not moving at all. For example, rate of employment of women. So the 2030 agenda was thought based on the lessons learned from the MDGs that was also extended as a time frame to give other countries time to catch up with certain indicators. But then it was a huge reflection about the integrity of the agenda. Also, let's not forget that as we were doing MDGs, we lost the ball as the UN system with the private sector. We had the whole 4G and 3G and the smartphones that came that completely took us unprepared as bureaucrats of the UN. So we were not getting the signals. What is the private sector doing? So we were going ahead with traditional education methods or employment, etc., while you had other types of jobs that were being created. We had other types of skills that were needed. Therefore, the 2030 agenda realized that we better sit down with the private sector. We better be even more serious about having our antennas with what's happening in the world with artificial intelligence, with innovation. And then let's see that now in the 21st century, the human development is an integrated solution. It cannot be that education you achieve all, or only by having health you achieve all. You need to have the employment, you need to have the planet, because let's not forget, we had the deterioration of the planet and we had started to getting data, more data, and then it became such a concern because look at how many disasters happened. I personally worked on disasters in 2005 in Pakistan. We had the disasters of Haiti, of earthquake in 2010. Immediately after, we had the Philippines, we had the Bangladesh, and those were bringing development gains by decades. So 1 week of a natural disaster brings you 10 years back in terms of development gains in human. So therefore, this prevention and recovery, sustainable development, the integrated agenda about looking at the benefits between education, between health, between rights, between access to services, between the jobs. So you cannot, it's like a human being, you cannot fix for example, if your arm hurts, you cannot only fix the arm, because and then if you don't fix your headache, so it's the whole body. And therefore the human development, and this is why it's called sustainable development, was looked as an integral agenda. So this is why I think this what is different in the SDGs. This is what I think, what I said earlier, that SDGs is not a platform exclusive to United Nations, is for the private sector. And you must have heard about the Global Compact or Unleash initiative with the big private companies. It's of civil society. And otherwise, we will not have a sustainable development and achieve really a better world for everyone. And when I say everyone, this is the fundamental underpinning principle, leave no one behind. So let's not forget that with MDGs, we also faced a huge gap between the richest and the poorest, within the same locality, within the same area, within the same country. And sometimes within the very small defined geographic areas, you had extremes that sometimes you think, how is that possible to happen?
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much for your answer. And now I'm going to ask you one more basic question. And I believe that anyone who's not familiar with the SDGs and the PNUD would ask it. Are the SDGs identical for all countries?
Very, very, very good questions. SDGs are a global agenda, and the 17 goals are the same for all countries. All the indicators are the same, and all the indicators are the same for all countries. Now, where is the difference? The difference is on the baselines. Not every country is in the same baseline, and not every country will invest on the same 17 at the same way or at the same time. So that's why every country appropriates the 2030 agenda, those 17 goals, and based on their internal baselines and their development priority through the national government plans, they defined which of the SDGs to tackle first, and at what extent also in terms of financing. Because what does that mean? It means basically that you put the spoon where your mouth is, right? So the idea is that how would you unleash a lot of benefits for human development if you invest, for example, in the decent employment? Let me get you an example. Let me give you an example. Let's take the SDG number 8, which is decent employment. And then you take SDG number 5, which is gender equality. You will not be surprised to hear me say that in the Arab world, we have the women's higher education even exceeding the one of the boys' education. So we have a very highly talented, highly educated, younger women generation. And this is thanks to the MDG agenda that it was pushed. So we are even in some countries where we have not only the higher education, but even the enrollment in universities of girls that is higher than of the boys. And they are successful. It's quality education. It's not just the enrollment rate. But when you go to the job market and to the job hunting, women in the Arab region, for example, are the least employed. So despite that they have all the qualifications, the access to employment, which is the SDG 8, is not there. So now it depends the strategies of the countries. A country would think that employing women is not only the right thing to do, but is the smart thing to do. Because by the smart economics, it's proven already globally that employing women is only win-win situation. Despite that they have been discriminatory about their maternity leaves and the pay gaps and differences in payment. So if you do smart economics and leave alone that it's the right thing to do because they deserve to have equal rights to access to employment as the law says, then you'd realize that a country X would invest, and then suddenly you will have the employment of women, and then the productivity of the country and the GDP of the country goes higher. To a point that I remember very well, there was a McKinsey study that in the MENA region, if women are employed equally as men, the GDP would decrease with the billions in a double digits. I can't remember the exact, but I can find the study. It's a study of 2016 or 2015. Just to tell you, but that means that you would need to invest into making women employable, in a sense, not only for their education, but having the sectors, having the industry, having the private and public sector employing women and creating conditions for their employment, meaning they care for the kids, meaning working from home, if they have to work from home half and a half to attend other duties, because as women in our region, we have traditional customs and we don't stop working when we go home. We continue working and it's measured. By the time you measured, it's about 4 hours more than the man, despite that you might be fully employed. So you still take care of your children and of your house and you do your housewife work and other obligations towards your parents or elderly. So if they free the time by creating other care services, they not only develop the care service work, which is another development sector, but they employ women. So these are investment choices. What I call them development finance assessments. So you do those, UNDP has a tool which is called DFA, which works with Ministry of Finances or Ministry of Planning and works towards financing strategies and financing SDG strategies for sectors where we believe that by working in one sector would unleash the potential in multiple sectors. So, and then you not only have an achievement of SDG 5 on equality, but decent employment SDG 8, and a sector that can be, for example, agriculture and no hunger if it is livelihoods, for example, under the second, if we target agriculture sector where women in rural areas work the most. So this is in a lot of sentences what I'm trying to explain about the strategies that every country chooses by development choices that they made in their plans. So yes, SDGs are the same for all. Yes, the same indicators, but the plans are different, the strategies to get there are different, and the baselines of where they start are different.
Okay, great. So as I told you, Mrs. Blerta, I'm gonna ask you general questions for the moment before we go into details and discuss a couple of SDGs. So, you know, we have a mix of French and English questions. So my next question is in French. Pour la bonne compréhension, y a-t-il un bureau du PNUD dans chaque pays dans le monde ou seulement dans les pays en développement?
Je me réponds en français ou en anglais comme
As you want.
Ok, bah, je vais essayer en français. En fait, le PNUD, comme j'ai dit tout à l'heure, est présent en 170 pays. En fait, le PNUD, c'est dans les 3 contextes, les pays en développement, les pays développés et les pays très développés. Par exemple, vous avez le PNUD dans le pays qu'on appelle net contributing countries comme le Gulf countries like Kuwait, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia. Vous avez le PNUD dans les pays middle income countries comme le cas ici en Algérie ou en Tunisie ou en Égypte ou dans mon propre pays en Albanie. Vous avez aussi le PNUD dans les pays vraiment, we call it low income countries, et comme par exemple, on a le Mali, le Niger, le pays Malawi, et juste pour donner le Bolivie, juste pour donner en fait des noms. Mais dans le 170 pays, si on parle de toutes les nations qui sont dans le General Assembly des Nations Unies, je pense on couvre presque 100%, pas 100%, mais presque 100%.
Très bien. Ok. Et donc, en fait, quel est le budget annuel du PNUD et comment est-il réparti par pays où il est présent?
Okay, this is a very good question. So, and it's a very complicated one. So I can tell you how it works in terms of the budgets are allocated. So we get funded from our headquarters, and our headquarters get funded by the member states. And the member states are the members of the United Nations, which includes also Algeria. And we have an executive board, and in that executive board, every 4 years we present the strategic plan. And in that strategic plan, there is the allocation of funding towards achieving those objectives. So the financing is done globally, and from globally, then we have financing that reaches our offices, which we call core funds. Or institutional budgets, but at the same time, the programs that I mentioned to you earlier, we have opportunities to mobilize locally in agreement with the government. So what we have, for example, I did not mention the partnerships earlier, but we have financing that we receive here bilaterally from European Union, from the Switzerland, from the United States, from Norway, from UK, from different member states that are present here, and I hope from Japan. I hope I don't forget anyone, because if they hear me, they say, "I didn't mention our contribution." But so the structure, how it works is that for our functioning, we get core from New York, which is given by member states at the central level. And for programs, we mobilize with the support of the government Algeria, with the member states here. And then, of course, there are global funds, like I talked about Global Environment Facility earlier, which is a fund which is a huge partner of Algeria, and all our environment programs are really very much well funded by this global fund. And there are other global funds, the Green Climate Fund. There is a global fund against AIDS and tuberculosis. There is a global fund against violence against women. There is a multi-donor trust fund now established for COVID response, where we apply funding based on the needs of, for example, of the program that we will develop here. So that's our mechanism. But I'm not able to give now. I don't have the bottom line of how big the UNDP is. But I think at some point I heard it's either 5 or 6 billion organization.
Ok, très bien. Et donc, en tout, combien de programmes ou initiatives lancés en Algérie, ceux notamment liés aux ODD?
Comment vous pouvez répéter?
Combien de programmes ou initiatives ont été lancés en Algérie, et notamment ceux liés aux SDGs?
Bah, tout à fait. Je pense qu'il y a déjà un programme conjoint que s'était lancé il y a 2 ans, même avant mon arrivée, avec toutes les agences des Nations Unies, avec le comité interministériel, ça s'appelle en fait le programme ODD. On est en train de travailler sur la deuxième phase, comme toutes les agences ensemble, parce que comme c'est un agenda global. Mais au niveau du PNUD, on a plusieurs programmes nouveaux qui contribuent, notamment le programme de gouvernance que je parlais tout à l'heure, l'appui à la révision de constitution, l'appui la stratégie anticorruption. Ça, c'est des programmes tous neufs, mais qui sont liés à ODD 16, en fait, qu'on appelle ODD gouvernance, juste pour la simplifier. En fait, c'est l'ODD 16. Et les programmes d'environnement et de gestion de déchets, c'est un programme qui rentre dans le ODD sur le... C'est le DD 13, si je ne me trompe pas, au niveau de nombre. Et voilà, ça, c'est des programmes qui, en fait, sont liés. Et nous, on a une accountability, on est redevable par rapport à le rapport qu'on fait au gouvernement, par rapport aux objectifs, par rapport aux indicateurs qui rentrent, en fait, en synergie avec le reporting national que le gouvernement fait par rapport à l'agenda 2030 à New York. En fait, il y a un rapport national volontaire que tous les pays membres font, et l'Algérie l'a fait aussi l'année dernière. It's called Voluntary National Report, VNR, ou en français, le rapport national volontaire de 2019, où l'Algérie va devant les Nations Unies et présente, en fait, les réalisations des objectifs des ODD, en fait, les défis et aussi les actions prochaines pour atteindre les objectifs 2030.
So, please, Mrs. Blerta, tell me about the online training that you are planning to launch to inform and train Algerian people about your program and the SDGs, because I believe that most of us, including me, we don't know much about SDGs or nothing at all.
Thank you very much for bringing this, because we have been discussing a lot about how to increase awareness about the SDGs and how to reach the communities and how to reach the youth. And if this is one objective that we have in UNDP, is to reach with knowledge as much as we can the youth, the schools, the young people, wherever they are across the country. And today with the technology, this is possible. We are trying to enter into a partnership with a voluntary program for raising the awareness and having a series of webinars, even after SahraTech, where we would like to have by themes and precisely increase the awareness on the SDGs overall by SDG. But for example, it's very important to increase more and more the awareness on the environment portfolio, for example, that we do, because we have great achievements. It's a very important agenda. There's going to be no sustainable development and Agenda 2030 without preserving the environment. The COVID response showed us that the environment started breathing, the biodiversity started appearing, and I think that it's our work to preserve and to review and to look what were some of the things that worked, why did they work, why the circulation of cars, why the less pollution, why there was animals coming suddenly in the streets, why the noise was so big, renewable energies, and how this COVID also told us to behave differently with nature, to behave differently with ourselves, and combining the awareness of SDGs with precise thematic areas where everybody can feel that has a civic duty to contribute to. This is an approach that we in UNDP are looking at towards outreaching with communication and behavioral change about SDGs. So very soon we will launch a series of webinars, so virtual, but also a voluntary initiative to reach every community on a combination between a message on the SDGs, but also concrete civic action, especially with regards to the environment and to the civic duty of sustainable development and contribution that every one of us has for the society, for the community, and for ourselves. I mean, let's think about it. If there is one thing that we learned from COVID, I think is this solidarity, right? We realized and we came back to realizing what are the fundamental values. We came to valuing education more because we saw when we did not, we are home and studying from, the kids are home and studying virtually. We realized that how important the health systems is not that you don't know, but it became very acute. So we went back to some basic values. We realized that how important is to help the most vulnerable, because virus attacked everybody maybe the same, but did not have the same impact to everyone. The one who did not have a job, the one who did not have a savings and a social safety net, the ones who were with more children in crowded spaces where less square meters and social distancing when you are 8 in the house or in a small apartment, it's not possible. So virus attacks everyone, but has impacted everyone differently. So the ones that were more vulnerable, informal jobs with no social safety, with no savings, with less well-conditioned. And I think that sign of solidarity has to, and as we build back better, this word build back better is very important to keep in mind, not only as a jargon, as a theory, but to actually put it in practice and see what does it mean for a healthier society and healthier altogether, because we also realize that this is altogether issue, is not an individualistic crisis.
Yeah, exactly. Donc, Madame Blerta, en fait, pour que le PNUD puisse réaliser ses objectifs, beaucoup de parties prenantes doivent être pleinement impliquées dans le programme. Donc, ma question, quels sont les liens entre le PNUD et la société civile, les organisations patronales, les centres de formation et autres incubateurs?
Pardon, vous êtes coupé, vous pouvez, j'arrive pas.
Vous voulez que je reprenne la question?
S'il vous plaît.
Oui. Donc, quels sont les liens entre le PNUD et la société civile, les organisations patronales, les centres de formation et autres incubateurs?
Merci. Si vous permettez, en fait, au niveau de relations avec la société civile, en fait, c'est un partenaire à part entière au PNUD. En fait, tous les programmes qu'on fait, si on parle des programmes dans le volet gouvernance ou les programmes dans le volet d'environnement et développement durable, en fait, la société civile, c'est toujours un partenaire dans nos projets. Je parlais tout à l'heure pour le projet CAPDEL, l'association de cette commune qui a produit plus de 20 000 bavettes. Ça, c'est une activité productive. Je parlais tout à l'heure de la réinsertion des prisonniers. La société civile, on travaille avec eux pour la réinsertion des prisonniers vraiment de la vie sociale et économique. Mais j'étais à Tamaracet avec notre projet, avec le parc culturel que je parlais tout à l'heure, que c'est un projet phare, qu'on est tellement fiers de ce projet, des réussites de ce projet, l'équipe de projet national et aussi l'équipe, en fait, qu'ils ont travaillé très dur. Mais là, on signait des contrats avec les associations sur des projets et sur l'engagement très précise par rapport à la préservation de la biodiversité et protection des parcs. Et même, par exemple, avec les associations de tourisme pour un tourisme durable et responsable. Je vous dis qu'en fait, avec tout ce qu'on fait, la partie de la société civile, pour nous, c'est très important et c'est en fait presque présent dans tous les projets, sauf s'il y a vraiment des projets normatifs. Donc même avec les projets qui sont normatifs, que ça veut dire qu'on est dans les conventions d'environnement, conventions APA, il y a des consultations qui se font avec la société civile. Et aussi, si je prends le projet de la participation politique des femmes, tout à fait, la société civile elle est toujours présente. En fait, ça fait partie de notre modus operandi. When it comes to what I wanted to say, which is something very important and related to the SDGs, is that for colleagues who have followed the program of Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, there has been a consultation on it with the civil society, organized jointly with CNES, with the Conseil National Économique et Social. And I think that is a huge platform that we need to use more and more effectively to reach out to the civil society. And as UNDP, we just signed very recently a partnership with CNES. And in that partnership with CNES, one of our work areas, and I'm trying to quote it perfectly as it is in the document, so I don't paraphrase it, is that one of the cooperation is about trying to figure out where it is. Is about supporting the capacities of CNES for mediating the social conflict between the civil society and the public institutions. And UNDP has a huge experience on mediation and in establishing national institutions with capacities of the systems, but also with individuals. And I think this shows that when we say civil society, I just also want to be clear, civil society is not only the associations. Civil society is also private sector. Civil society is also the entrepreneurial, the syndicates. Civil society are also academia is part of the civil society in a broader sense of the term. So indeed, UNDP works with all of them. But the more concrete is through the projects that I mentioned, and also through this new partnership agreement with CNES that we will work on the mediation of social conflicts.
Because you're talking about the National Economic and Social Council, I'd like to highlight this point and ask you a couple of questions. So how do you plan to strengthen the National Economic and Social Council capacities in formulating a recommendation for a sustainable and inclusive development and better monitoring human and economic development in Nigeria?
When I came here in Nigeria, we definitely, when you take a job, your function is to look at what are the partners and what you need to revive, what you need to strengthen, how you need to be strategic. And of course, CNES is one of the key partners for UNDP, historic one. Because with the CNES, UNDP has a historical relation with regards to developing the Human Development Report. Human Development Report is a flagship report that UNDP does globally, but also in the country. And Algeria is part of those countries who has developed a National Human Development Report, and the latest one was done in 2016. So it was about time to revive this partnership and to look at joint work to having another National Human Development Report. So for us, this is a huge milestone. The work now starts. Now we got into agreement, but actually the work to develop the report starts now. And what UNDP brings is really global expertise, global tools, capacity building, internalizing of those global indexes that become part of the Human Development Index for the Algeria to develop its own national report. And those national report is a very good instrument for public decision-making and informing public policy in the government. At the same time, the second component was really to help and to support with evaluation of public policies in different areas, social and economic public policies. And also, again, here we bring the global expertise. This is not, we do it in a lot of countries. And it's a very pertinent and particular technical expertise in order to support with analysis skills and evaluating of such public policies. It can be on health, it can be on education, it can be on economic sectors. Something more specific on the economy is that we are also supporting and will start the work towards a study about looking at sectoral and geographic entrepreneurship development ecosystems. So looking at the value chains that are growth sectors, but at the regional level, but also by sector. For example, can be, I don't know, just taking a service sector, for example, can be banking, or can be a productive sector. And in the productive sector, it can be, I don't know, agriculture, or it can be regional. For example, this region is known for fisheries, and then how you bring this value chain in across different regions in the country. And what is important about the ecosystems, because the ecosystem involves the startup, involves the incubator, involves the financing. It's basically A to Z type of situation, from the production line to the export if you export, or to the consumption if it is for internal or external market. So this is another study that I think it's going to help decision making with regards to productive sectors, with regards to startups, with regards to financing, and with regards to focusing decision makings on the economic choices by geographic or by sector. So these are all works that we will start after. I mean, we signed a week ago the MOU, and now the work actually starts now to be able to deliver on those commitments.
Très bien. Donc, Madame Blerta, Accelerators Labs, Capwork, Algeria Startup Challenge et Hackathon, pouvez-vous expliquer concrètement en quoi allez-vous collaborer et cela peut-il représenter un exemple pour les autres pays?
Accelerator Labs, Hackathons, and what else?
Capwork and Algeria Startup Challenge. Donc, pouvez-vous nous expliquer concrètement en quoi allez-vous collaborer et cela peut-il représenter un exemple pour les autres pays?
Thank you. The Accelerator Lab, it's one of those most innovative UNDP initiatives that has been very much supported and has very much been part of what we call it the new generation UNDP. It's new generation from different reasons. First, it's new generation because the Accelerator Labs bring the innovative solutions and execution of such solutions, the testing of such solutions through a very rigorous process. And we have 3 colleagues in the office. Algeria is part of this global initiative. And I have to say that indeed it's a new generation, also the way how we behave towards our development approach. So if you ask a bureaucrat like me that has been 20 plus years in the system, I will go the old usual way. But if you bring this new blood and the new insertion of energy, actually there are indeed steps and they're accelerating. They're bringing us all to think with what is the cutting edge of thinking, of action, and of movement and being fast. So our machinery is pretty slow. I mean, we are a bureaucratic system, old organization, so we don't have the agility that is required in the days, especially on the SDG agenda, that you need to be agile, you need to be responsive, youth, private sector is dynamic, etc. So this is what the accelerators labs are bringing a new vision, are bringing agility, are bringing solutions, and are being brave in testing those solutions. We have, for the first time, not having a problem to fail, because we believe that by failing, we learn better on how to do next time even better, because we learn by failing. In a bureaucratic system, we were very averse to testing things that are not proven before. So this new thinking in UNDP is creating a space for us, for our own programming, for our own behavior as managers and as colleagues, to basically open our minds and also to embrace partners that were not our usual suspects. When you talk to me about civil society, I'm very comfortable because we have done it all our life. We talk about cooperating with governments, and I will be very comfortable because this is what we do. This is everything we do is cooperating with the government. You start talking to me about working with the private sector. I need my colleagues of Accelerator Lab, Hanan, Hamdi, and Walid, to make me feel at ease that I have them because they're in the front lines and they know, and they come from different areas. One is very big, has been working with youth and activism, and you can see that energy. The other one has worked with incubators. I talked about earlier about a social economy, a social and economie sociale et solidaire, so it comes from that background. The other one is more of a researcher, has worked in few UN agencies, so he brings all that intelligent background of other agencies, so it's not somebody that has started with one organization and is gonna retire there. And this dynamic brought us to bringing opening areas with hackathons, for example, which UNDP hackathons is recent. So we are catching up thanks to Accelerator Labs. So when they introduced us and me personally to the Algeria Startup Challenge, we did have a meeting, and I could see that we were asking questions that maybe were like, what are these questions? I mean, come on, guys, you need to act fast. But then after we overcome, thanks to their perseverance and thanks to their explanation, and then we said, wow, we can be partners. Then we saw potential. Then we said, okay, we can use this platform to reach exactly the audience that you have with the development language, to exactly bring the SDG agenda to not remain only in the UN lobbies and offices or partners that we work closely with, but reach everyone. And actually, when I listened to a couple of your webinars, I said, this is it. I mean, this is our generation. I mean, this is, this is how we reach. And you were not paralyzed. You were working every night. Yes, we were confined, but everybody was working, and it was bringing the whole intellectual. So when this opportunity came to be partner with Algeria Startup Challenge, I immediately embraced it because, and through the CAP work as an incubator, I think definitely that's where we want to test our ideas through those incubators. And then the ideas and solutions that we talked about earlier, UNDP as a solution integrator, that's exactly where we want. We want to create synergy with incubators, with the industry, so that it can be sustainable. Otherwise, it cannot have a life of a project that I manage here in the office. So the partnership with Algeria Startup Challenge, for us, we are very honored. We definitely see it as an official partner to be able to support your work, but at the same time to connect the Algeria Startup Challenge with Tunisia Startup Challenge, or with Malawi Startup Challenge, or with China Startup Challenge, because we have 70 labs globally speaking, and there are going to be more, and create this global and regional network where the work we are doing in Algeria, the voice and the youth and the approaches and innovation and solutions are reaching some others that might not have access to such information. And at the same time, we here in Algeria get to be informed and inspired by solutions at others. So I see it as a platform for us to come up with a development agenda to humanity and to Algerian population at large, and to youth especially. And I see as in return for giving space on a global network that we have through the labs and through our work in 170 countries to the Algerian startups, so that we can have this south-south, north-south. And that's the beauty about the global world we are living in. So with the hackathon, for me, I had had the experience in Egypt. I had been part of it, and I saw the value and the outreach, and we had thousands of students hooked on hackathon and contributing. And we saw that with innovative ways, how much we can reach with our message and what we wanted to explain. And I think, I hope that audience also feel at the same way rewarded as we feel when we exchange with them.
Merci, Madame Blerta. Et donc, parce qu'on parle de start-up et d'incubateurs, envisagez-vous une collaboration avec le nouveau ministère des start-up en matière de transfert technologique via le CNUT?
What we definitely are trying to broaden our partnerships. We are having conversations with the government and different ministries, but definitely the Ministry of Startup. I had the honor to, when we launched the Accelerator Lab, we were honored by the presence of the minister. We are still going to have a number of meetings and conversations to develop our scope of cooperation. At the same thing, we are working with the Minister of small and medium, but because it's one ministry, small, medium enterprise, the startups, and the gestion de connaissances, if I'm not mistaken, and knowledge management. So we will. I cannot share any concrete steps yet because this is still being discussed. But I just recently noticed the executive decision about the ANSEJ that has moved from the Ministry of Labor to the Ministry of Small Petty Enterprises. And I think that connection with startups, transfer of technology, and incubators, I think we need to look at the theory of change and how we as a UNDP can be of added value to their strategies. But it's not yet developed as a concrete scope of work, but we are in the conversation.
Okay, thank you. So, Mrs. Blerta, I believe that there is that topic that you've been working on for many, many years, and it's domestic violence and violence against women and girls. So, the European Union and the United Nations have launched a new partnership to eliminate all forms of violence against women and girls, backed by an initiative of 500 million euros. What is your
Yes, I'm very familiar with the Spotlight initiative. Indeed, it is an initiative between European Union and the United Nations. It is a program that was launched fundamentally around three forms of violence. It was launched in Latin America about the femicide. It was launched in Africa a lot on covering issues of violence against women, primarily on the female genital mutilation because I know a couple of very important programs around that and broader forms of violence against women. And also in Asia, especially in Southeast Asia, about trafficking that happens, especially with regards to the migrant women. However, this initiative, there is another initiative very similar, which is under the spotlight in the Western Balkans, and this is about the domestic violence. But the Spotlight initiative did not include the Arab countries. And for the European Union, Egypt, Tunisia, Morocco, and Algeria are part of the South neighborhood under the European, so they are not part of the Africa desk. This is a bureaucratic division, but I needed to say it because Algeria, as a definition, doesn't belong to the Spotlight initiative. So it covers a number of countries in Africa, but not the North Africa. This has been discussed. Even I have had an opportunity to discuss on how we can include the North African countries. And the first question has been, what is your gender analysis? So what are the rates of perpetration of violence in the country? Because let's not forget that it looks at a holistic approach around violence against women. So it looks at the legalistic part. So what policies do we have in countries for preventing and for responding to forms of violence? What types of services are available there for women who are victims and survivors of such forms of violence? And then what are the other access to justice and how you can hold justice and recur justice to such forms? In this case, definitely I think we need to lobby more and advocate more with the European Union for the spotlight, but nothing prevents us from having a comprehensive ending violence against women program in the country if the government thinks that this is a priority and if the gender analysis in the country dictate that this is indeed a priority for Algeria. I can confirm to you that when it comes to the legalistic part, Algeria is one of the most advanced countries when it comes to what it is in terms of laws and bylaws in the country. Text application, the bylaws. Also, in terms of access to services, there are shelters. I call them shelters, but center where women victims of violence can go, and they are run by the government, by the Ministry of Solidarity, where there is a women department. In terms of integration in the society, about finding a space after you basically go and ask for services, this is, I think, where we need to work much more, because of course traditional and cultural barriers that we need to work with the society to be able to allow for their full integration of those survivors of violence. I am not able to say, I don't have the data about how many cases have been reported in the country and how many of the cases have been prosecuted. But for me, I see it as a whole chain, from the access to justice for women, from the training the prosecutors to prosecute cases of violence against women, to judges to be able to judge such cases in a honest and a proper way, to having services, being them psychological, economic, health services that are made available to those women who dare to claim violence against them and get protected, but then they need to integrate in the society. So it's the full cycle. And nobody is immune from forms of violence, especially physical violence. Globally speaking, we have 1 in 3 women that is subject to physical violence, or a form of violence, sorry. COVID showed it very well. Even in Algeria, we had articles and NGOs were speaking about increased forms of violence. I expect, globally speaking, and when I say globally, I don't think we are spared from the fact that we are going to have a part of physical violence. There's going to be psychological violence, and that psychological violence is going to hit both women and men, because there are people who has lost their jobs, economy has gone down, access to employment, they have no savings, all this built up stress around COVID. And we know that the worst expression of stress is around violence that can happen intra-partners, or it can happen against children. So, and this hardship is not going to end with the end of COVID. It's going to continue. We know that it's going to continue. It's going to continue in every household. And how we support each other, how the community supports, what would be the mechanisms for psychosocial support, for economic support, for releasing such tension at the household level. These are all strategies that, with the post-COVID impact assessment, I hope we will be able to recommend to decision makers and to NGOs and to our own programs on how we should tackle this problem.
So, Mrs. Blerta, what are the concrete actions you're taking now, as we speak, to prevent violence against women and girls in Algeria?
The concrete actions so far that what we have been doing has been a lot of communication. We as UNDP don't have a program per se in terms of ending violence against women, but we have worked a lot on the advocacy and the communication around this issue. And we have been approached also by a number of associations on how they can get financial support to be able to support those women that are subject to such forms of violence. And we are looking into giving financial support to those associations. Of course, let's not forget that we have a Ministry of Solidarity that is very active also, and have also ways of supporting and funds for supporting the organizations that support those women. So at the moment, in terms of concrete service delivery, this is done either by government centers or by associations that are working through the funding that they get directly from the government or through the UN organizations. But apart more than advocacy, here in Algeria, I cannot say that we are contributing more than that.
Okay, so actually in Algeria, how does the PNUD work to change women and girls' life in developing countries or in Algeria, and what actions have been launched in Algeria? I mean, training programs or communication sessions, etc. What did you achieve until now?
I think that what UNDP has been doing the most here historically has been promoting women's participation. So this has been mainly in the local councils and in the parliament. So this has been the main work around women's empowerment. However, through other programs, I talked earlier about the Gerbes, the humid area based project, and there we are supporting economically all women cooperatives. So they are integrated and supporting economic development and supporting economic activity and production of those women cooperatives that are residing in Gerbes, and they are part of this value chain of the whole ecosystem that we are supporting. I am a personal believer the economic support is the best support to be able to have a woman be able to come back to her feet, if I may put it that way. So UNDP, through the participation, which has contributed a lot in terms of decision-making laws, because women in parliament, then they have a voice and a space. But then economically speaking, has been through integrating through economic projects. The same thing with CAPDEL in the communities that we have. Concrete work has been done not only with local elected women who are part of those development plans at the community level, but also under the economic development initiatives and under the work we are doing with the associations in those communities. So targeting women through our programs is a priority. So women as beneficiaries of our activities. The same, I was talking for the Parc Culturel. I can tell you with a lot of confidence that we have helped women's associations, but also women from the areas to get employed in the project, so that they can benefit and so I see it mainly as a mainstream, is a principle, is a way of how you're doing and how you design your program, to make sure that women are integrated throughout your logic of the program. So not as a one-time thing. But when it comes to violence against women, UNDP together with UNFPA and UN Women and ESWA, I think, launched, finalized last year what we called the Gender Justice Report. It was done in the whole MENA region, and also we had a gender report also for Algeria. So in that gender justice report, you will see that you have the whole mapping of all legalistic provisions that are according to CEDAW framework, which is the convention of really the Convention of Women's Rights. And there you see how the alignment of Algerian policies have been made towards the commitment to this convention that is part of the obligation of the country. And I have to say that Algeria rates pretty high in that regard when it comes to the gender justice report and how Algeria has been tackling all the policy framework on the violence issues, on access to justice issues, on economic issues, just to give a few examples.
So since you are talking about human rights, let's highlight the access to health and social protection. So could you explain, please, the Human Development Index and how can social protection be extended in the unequal context of globalization? How to move from a conceptual framework to an effective implementation? I mean, what are the tools proposed by the unit today?
This is a very, very good question. And it's a very difficult one because I'm thinking as I'm speaking to you about the Human Development Index, and at this point in time I'm not able to highlight all the elements, but indeed it's a very important index that is developed by a number of indicators, and education, health, gender, access to employment, they are all part of these indicators. I don't have it now in front of me to be able to analyze that, but what UNDP does is that UNDP gets those data based on the global indicators that every country reports globally every year, and then produces this national report. And in that national report, you'll see that there is rating of countries, and there every country has a page where it says where they are. And in that report, you'll see if you are upwards or downwards versus the year before or when it was the prior report. So what does that mean is that, and then what UNDP does, they take a subject matter and analyzes the correlation between those indicators related to that subject matter. For example, quality, life, or equality, or depending on the topic, that's how the correlation is done. Now, for example, if I put myself in a place of a decision maker, I would go and I will check where I was a year or 2 years ago and where I am now, because the errors will tell you if you are upwards or downwards given the certain indicators. And then you unpack that indicator and you see exactly what areas correlated and made that indicator look, that number, right, that went upwards or downwards. And that's where your public policy comes, and that's where your analytical work comes, and that's where your investment strategy comes in terms of where do you want to improve. If it was related to health, or if it was related to education, or if it was related access to employment, or it was related to violence that spiked up, to be able to unpack that particular indicator in different indices. So I cannot say more because I don't have that in front of me to be more concrete. But that's why in Algeria, for example, for us, it's such an important thing to do the National Human Development Report, because by doing that, we will be able to collect the data that we will need to put under those indices. And there we will see ourselves like in a mirror where we are on those human development indicators, to be able then to work and to improve that for the next 2 years or 3 years. I don't know if I answered, but that's the maximum I can do at this point.
Yeah, you know, we have many questions, but we've been here already for 2 hours. So I have just 2 last questions, if you allow. I'm going to ask you a question in French from a member of Algeria Startup Challenge, Madame Shafia Abid. She says, ODD 11 Lutte contre le changement climatique. L'Algérie se situe dans une zone de stress hydrique amplifiée par le changement climatique. La coopération dans l'échange des données est plus que vitale. Quel rôle pour le PNUD?
Merci beaucoup. En fait, tout à l'heure, je pense que je suis passée un peu vite avec le portefeuille d'environnement et de développement durable. Et je serais très ravie de rencontrer Madame Seffé aussi après le SahraTech un jour dans les bureaux de PNUD pour donner plus d'informations. Mais tout à fait, nous, on accompagne en fait le développement du rapport national du changement climatique. On accompagne le process du gouvernement par rapport à la convention de Paris Agreement. On accompagne aussi les autres conventions que j'ai parlé, comme le Nagoya Protocol ou l'autre là de Ramsar, que je parlais tout à l'heure avec le projet de Gerbes. Et en fait, à travers ces protocoles, à travers ces projets, à travers ces reporting, on appuie les institutions avec l'expertise justement pour avoir toutes les informations possibles. Maintenant, la question est trop technique, j'arrive pas à trouver les enjeux vraiment pour donner la réponse précise sur ça, mais parce que comme c'est très technique, on a des experts qui s'engagent avec chaque rapport, avec chaque projet. Je suis sûre que les collègues online, ils seront très prêts à répondre à cette question. Mais moi, je pense que le mieux, c'est d'avoir une réunion où je peux vous répondre par email et vous pouvez poster ça. Parce que, en fait, pour vous répondre exactement quelles sont les obligations au niveau de changement climatique, au niveau de l'APA, par exemple, le cadre juridique qu'on est en train de développer, le 6e rapport au niveau de biodiversité, j'espère que c'est vraiment notre réussite, mais tout ça sont des rapports très techniques avec des obligations très techniques et avec les datas très techniques. Pour moi, si je reste dans le contexte général, ce que j'ai parlé avec la ministre de l'Environnement, c'est vraiment d'appuyer les efforts du ministère à travers le plan national, à travers tous ces protocoles et toutes ces conventions, mais aussi les appuyer avec leur stratégie, par exemple, pour l'énergie renouvelable, en fait, parce que c'est une démarche multisecteur, c'est une démarche très importante. L'Algérie a fait vraiment des commitments, je ne sais pas comment dire. Comment?
Des engagements.
Des engagements exactement par rapport à ça. Ça revient toujours Paris Agreement, National Report, Agenda 2030. Mais tout ça, en fait, au niveau technique, il y a plusieurs volets que ma collègue Faiza Bendris, que je salue, travaille avec son équipe et qu'on peut mettre à disposition de vous très, très rapidement.
Bien.
Si je pense à l'Algérie, on a tellement de choses à faire, mais aussi on a tellement de choses à communiquer qu'ils font très bien. Mais la diversification énergétique, pour moi, c'est la première priorité. La préservation de biodiversité, la protection des ressources biologiques. Bien sûr, le Paris Agreement, c'est très important, ce sont des engagements, comme vous avez dit, très importants.
Thank you very much. So I have one last question from a viewer. It says, what are the short-term actions the PNUD is going to take to explain more the program and SDGs for Algerian people?
I think I am very glad that you are ending with this question, because this webinar has made me think and this conversation has made me think about what are the steps that we need to accelerate and how we can walk the talk. That's the most important. And I think the most important for me is the outreach and continuing with those webinars. We are discussing with the team that we will do webinar by theme and by SDG. So, for example, when I say theme, environment and durable solutions, and durable development, sustainable development, and how this connects with the SDG agenda, and continue with a series of webinars. I also promise that we will get into a project with civic engagement and voluntarism, and communication around the benefits of the SDGs for inclusive development. And I think these are two promises that I think we can continue to work immediately. And of course, I count on the cooperation with the Algeria Startup Challenge. This is our first engagement formally, but I'm counting and hoping that your platform or your outreach with our support and whatever technical information we can give to continue to reach the youth and the population across the country and across wilayas, and with different languages also. I recognize it's not only about English and French, it's also about Arabic and Berber language. So I think this is a commitment that we will make it happen. You have my word for that.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Blerta. It was a pleasure in this valuable time with you. We're really delighted to have you with us tonight. Thank you for this brilliant presentation and for answering all those questions. We have so many questions, but unfortunately we can't answer them all. So I always ask people to send us their questions to our page, Algeria Startup Challenge, and we do our best to answer them. So thank you again. It was a pleasure having you, and I hope that we're gonna see you again with us in Algeria Startup Challenge and Capo Work. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Huda, and thank you everyone for being patient with me. And I hope I live to your expectations, but this is the first time, and I hope we will have more opportunities. Merci beaucoup.
Merci à vous. شكرا. نحن نشكر المشاهدين اللي بقاو معنا حتى لهذه الساعة وتابعوا هذا الموضوع المهم جدا. شكرا لكم، شكرا على الأسئلة وعلى l'échange. Ne ratez pas s'il vous plaît les deux webinaires de demain et après-demain. Demain, c'est Algeria Diaspora Power, exemple de réussite de jeunes entrepreneurs qui vont partager avec vous leur expérience et التجارب تاعهم في الخارج وكيفاش يعني نجحوا في إنشاء des startups ونجحوا في المسيرة تاعهم. Après-demain, ne ratez pas le webinaire de Mehdi Omar Ouayesh qui va parler de l'impact du Covid sur la logistique de la supply chain. Merci beaucoup, SahraTech et au revoir. Très bonne soirée.
Merci. Ramadan Karim and Eid Mubarak.
Bye. Eid Mubarak.